And I want to take us to interesting story from Old Testament. We go to the book of Joshua, chapter 2. That's where we, Joshua chapter 2, that's where we spent the whole hour, hopefully. And hopefully you will spend more. I will not read the whole chapter. I will leave it to you. Maybe you will get some more out of the text, that more than what I got from the text. Did you notice that when you are going into the scripture, that sometimes God is making surprising choices? Did you notice that? Why God would choose Moses, a stuttering man, for a leader of a nation? It's a good choice. Somebody who was struggling to talk, that he would become a leader of a nation. He was a murderer, so not a good moral example too. Yeah. Some other choices like, David. His family was not respecting him or not thinking a lot of him. When the time came, when the prophet came to anoint, next person for a king, his father didn't remember him. He ignored him, left him in the field. He was presenting all these other older sons, but David was left with goats and sheep. And God chose David, Saul, a man that was good enough to go and search for a donkey that went astray, and he became a first king of Israel. Why God would choose somebody like that? Interesting. Some other surprising choices. Can you think of some? Samson. Couldn't God choose somebody better instead of Samson? Surprising choices. And then we go to New Testament, and Jesus himself is not making very much better with choosing. Obviously, it was a challenging task for Jesus to choose his disciples. Any one of us, if we find ourselves in the challenging situation, we spend time meditating, thinking through it, praying about it. And Jesus spent 12 hours praying before he chose his disciples. How many did he choose? 12. He spent 12 hours praying for 12 disciples. How much would you like to be prayed for 12, for 1 hour? If Jesus was praying for you for 1 hour, would it be good? But then he is choosing what kind of people? Extraordinary, wasn't it? True? Ordinary people, fishermen. Not much esteemed in the nation. Just fishermen. Not much education, not much status. Ordinary people. Gideon, another one from Old Testament. Scared man who was hiding somewhere in the vineyard when he was trying to thresh his barley. Okay, why was he threshing barley in the vineyard? Couldn't he do it in the barley field? No, he took the barley to vineyard, so no one would expect that he is threshing it in the vineyard. Why? Because Philistines would come and take his harvest. A very courageous man that God chose to lead the nation, to free the nation from Philistines. He himself was scared. And then God chooses Gideon, and Gideon is leading the nation. And when he is, leading the nation into battle, he's got the whole army. And what's happening next? God instructs him to take to dismiss everyone and leave himself 300. I'm just shortening the long story. He's leaving 300 men to go into the battle. Why did God make this kind of choices? Often we can get surprised. Throughout history of the world, God sometimes makes strange choices, and with some of them we would say, okay, maybe, With others we would say, well, I don't know, if we would look at it. Maybe sometimes we would say that's creative if we wanted to be kind to their choice. But as we are going through the scripture, God takes ordinary people and gives them extraordinary tasks, and that's what we want to go. That's what we want to focus today. Yes. When others see a shepherd boy, God will see it. Exactly. Yes. So let's go to Joshua chapter 2. And we start with first two verses. The word says, "Now Joshua, the son of Nun, sent out 2 men from Acacia Grove to spy secretly, saying, 'Go view the land, especially Jericho.' So they went and came to the house of a harlot named Rahab and lodged there. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, 'Behold, men have come here tonight from the children of Israel to search out the country.'" Here we notice that those 2 spies are sent to check on Jericho, or to check the land across the Jordan, the land that they were going to invade. And Joshua is giving them instruction that they should go and especially pay attention to Jericho. 2 men that were ordinary men. We don't know even the names. We know some of the names of the spies that were going through the Canaan when 40 years ago the 12 spies were sent into Canaan to search it. But this time it's only 2, and we don't know the names. They were ordinary men. Nobody knows who they were. They are anonymous. They were ordinary, and they were sent to check on the land. And they came to check and came to Jericho. Jericho was one of the principal cities in the region. It was like key to the area, key to Canaan. It was secure. It had all these walls built up and especially secure. It's another sermon on fall of Jericho or defeat of Jericho. We won't go there. But this is chapter 2, before the defeat of Jericho. And those 2 spies are coming to Jericho. Jericho, that was a center of worship of Ashtaroth, the goddess of moon. Interesting. The people of God are coming to the center of worship of another goddess. And celestial bodies, which is moon and sun and stars and so on. This is interesting. When the 2 spies come to Jericho, we are told that they came to the house of another ordinary woman. Maybe not that ordinary, but she was ordinary. She had maybe not usual occupation. She was living in the safety of the walls of the city. And they are coming there and stopping there. There was nothing special about this woman's life. She would be one of those people that were living there in Jericho. Her occupation would be irregular in some way, but it was nothing that would be something that she was somewhere ranking high in the society. She was one of those serviceman. True? If we could call it that way. She lived a life that was a very ordinary life. There would be many of them in Jericho. She lived a life that was, in a way, we would say mundane, average. Surely, she didn't look like she was someone important, and God would, and someone important that God would think that this person deserves to be saved. Okay? She would be a person that we would ask ourselves a question: would we want that kind of person in our church? True? We would ask ourselves that question. Do we really want to have that question? From our perspective, probably it would be the least expected or least deserving person to be saved. True? But Rahab had few things in addition against her. She was a Canaanite. She was belonging to the nation that was basically enemy of Israel. And here we have two Israelites that are coming into her house, and she belongs to the people, to enemies of Israelites, and there is already a verdict that these people, all of them, are totaled. That means that all of them are doomed to destruction. Is that what's happening? Is that what was happening? As we look through the history, the Israelites were coming, and eventually that is what was happening. According to God's own command, they were to be exterminated, because they had enough time. When we are looking in the Old Testament, they had enough time of grace, but now the time came where they were going to be pushed out. All of them were basically doomed to destruction. And Rahab was one of them. Rahab, however, have heard of the Lord, about what the Lord has done in the life of the nation. And she have heard the mighty acts of God in the life of the nation as he led his people out of Egypt and as he was leading them through the wilderness. She have heard, and she was evaluating the information that she have heard. She was a woman. That was another thing that was against her. In Old Testament, there was a average Jew would be praying that, thanking God, thanking Lord that he was not born as a gentle or a woman. So you can, just that prayer is reflecting the general attitude of men towards women. That was another thing that was against her. This was the prevailing attitude towards women in the society. And she was a woman. Not just back in those days, we can find similar attitudes in today's world too. It was women, they were viewed as second-class citizens, and that was what was happening. In this case, God worked through a person named Rahab, who just happened to be a woman, and he worked to work his plan and to take the plan to success. God can work through anyone, and even through ordinary person like a Canaanite woman. Rahab had one more thing against her. She had unusual occupation, not high status. She was a prostitute. We read already at the beginning. Does it make you wonder why God would choose that? Why God's judgment was, what was God's judgment at this point? Why God would choose a prostitute? In all of the city, couldn't he find a better, more respectable person to do their job? In all of the city of Jericho, wasn't there somebody more reputable that would be able to serve these two men who came from the wilderness? Or no, was that something else? What was motivating God that he chose, that he led these two men to a harlot, to a prostitute? Can you have a good character? Can you have principles and have a bad lifestyle? Is it possible? There may have been, but God looked at that person and he wants to teach us that there are things events in life that are creating or putting people in the situations that they are working against themselves. And they still have a character. This situation demonstrates that God is giving a chance to everyone, and God is a God of individuals, not the nations, not just whole nations. God doesn't save in packages, like in the whole groups, and that's where it's a message for us. Just because we are belonging to the group, that doesn't mean that we all have the same verdict. Here we have a situation where God is presenting himself as God of individuals, even though the judgment was passed on the entire nation. In this case, on Jericho, that God was able to save individuals. That demonstrates that God is the father of prodigals. Interesting. Without exception, each one of us has a hope. Without exception, each one of us has experiences in our lives like that prodigal son. Experiences that I would call a pig pen experience, where we don't want to talk much about it. True? Where we would not want to, anybody sitting next to me knowing about that story. We've got some of the shameful situation, and God is still our God, and God still loves us. And God still wants to save us. We wouldn't play a video, or we wouldn't make a movie about those moments in our lives. We would rather sit quiet, and we would rather not mention any of these moments. But God knows about those moments, and he still doesn't hold it against us. He is still God of mercy. As one of the preachers expressed this, he said, even if your own mother would give you birth in the church, you are not church member unless you were born again. So our birth, our status doesn't make any difference. The story shows that God does not make favorites between people, and he does not label people. And when we will go there, when we will label people, because due to our perceptions, due to how we see people, we can stand on a slippery ground. We are treading on the dangerous ground when we venture into this place. We cannot afford being prejudiced against people or play favorites with them. In Epistle of James, chapter 2, we have information that shows that God does not play favorites. He does not have favorites. Whether people are poor or rich, whether they are from high ranking status or low, God is treating everyone the same. There is no differences, that he doesn't make differences between people. Just because person belongs to certain economical background group, it doesn't mean that God will look at that person differently. Just because person have this or another racial background God will not look at that person differently. Whether it is male or female, poor or rich, God will look at us in the same way. Whether we are large, I often say that we've got, large friend or small friend. There was a time in American history where schools were segregated. We get more and more of the segregations in the world, although we are trying to make it united. True? It's strange. We are, for whatever price we want to make the world uniform, yet what is happening? We get more and more segregation. Strange. Something is wrong. That was the time where in America people were schools were segregated, and there was black schools and white schools. But the time came when this segregation was now going through the process of desegregation, and students would be mixed up, like mixed, blacks and whites going together. And from that, I want to share a story. There was a time where mother sent her daughter to school, and it was first day in the school where they would have to experience that mixed situation where blacks and white would be sitting next to each other. And mother was sort of, anxiously waiting for the daughter to come back from the first day of the new situation in school. And when she came, she asked, "Oh no, so how was it?" "Well, it was good." The little girl says, "Mommy, I sat next to a black girl all day, scared." "Mom," the little said, "we were both so scared, we held our hands together all day long." You see what was happening? Both of these girls were so scared that they were holding their hands together. They were so far apart, they were so scared, yet they were so close together. Interesting. Our perceptions. We can have our perceptions, yet we are going through the same experiences, through the same emotions, through the same fears, through the same weaknesses. God is God of everyone, of every person, of every individual. Why then God chose Rahab rather than someone else more respectable? Why God chose this woman, not someone else? The Bible is giving us some insights. First of all, Rahab had the courage to risk, to stand for what is right, stand for God, and she was able to see the Israelites in different light than everyone else in Jericho. For Israelites, when they left Egypt 40 years ago, they were able to go from Egypt to Canaan in about 2 to 3 weeks. How much do you think the information, how much time the information needed to come from the wilderness to Jericho in order that people would learn something about Israelites? If people would go in 2 weeks or 3 weeks from Egypt to Jericho, then information would have gone much faster through. So 40 years people were hearing about these Israelites traveling, wandering about wilderness. Do you think Rahab in her life had enough information to make up her mind about Israelites? When we are reading, when you go through this chapter, Rahab herself is telling the people that she is confident that God has given Jericho into the hands of Israelites because there is fear within the city against Israelites. Did she have enough time to make up her mind about what's going on? As time went on, Rahab noted evidences and made up her conclusions. She didn't need anyone else. We all make our own individual choices and make our own individual decisions. As we are gathering information that is around us, we may be told one thing, another thing, but then we are drawing our own conclusions, and we are making, when the time comes right, when the point of decision comes, we make our own decisions. Is that true to your life? She had plenty of time to collect information. As she was collecting that information, she was making observations, she was making conclusion, and when the two men stood on her doorstep and when they were speaking, suddenly those two Israelites of whom she have heard lifelong, now two of them were standing there, and she knew that they are the winners. And when she was looking at them, they were not the two people of another nation. They were the two people that were representatives of the kingdom of God. Rahab was nobody's fool. Nobody had to make up her mind. She was deciding for herself. She decided wisely and courageously. She decided against the doomed king of Jericho. Against the doomed nation of Jericho. Why? Because she has noticed that God of Israelites is the God of heaven and earth. You will notice that as you read the chapter. So with whom she had a greater chance? With the high-walled king of Jericho, or did she have a greater chance with God of universe? For us, the choice is obvious, isn't it? I wish and I pray that it will be obvious any moment when the point of decision will come for us. Rahab made her evaluation of the situation. She immediately hid those two people, two Israelites, on the roof. And she covered them nicely so nobody would suspect that anything happens there. When people came and inquired about it, she had already the answer for them. She already thought through this whole strategy, and she sent those inquirers towards the River Jordan, towards the fords, when you're reading the story. But then she came back to this man and she told them that they will go into the mountains. So she sent one group of people in one direction and she sent the spies in another direction, and then she said, wait for 3 days until these guys will make their way, will come back into the walls, and then you will make your way towards your people. That was the decision that she made. For these two Jews did not belong for her. They did not belong to any nation. They were the citizens. They were the part of the people of God. And when a push will come to shove in our own experiences, in everybody's experience, people will know. People will make their own decision. People will know who is who. And what do they represent and what they stand for. That's what will happen in every individual's life. All we need to do, and remember, there is a dynamic. Rahab was listening to information about people of God for all the time when Israelites were traveling in the wilderness. And she was not making any decision until there was two men that were on the doorstep. Until the time came, right time came. Paul says that not everyone who says he is a Jew is a Jew. So sometimes the perceptions may be deceiving. Somebody may be adhering or saying that he is adhering to this or that group, but he is something else. And that's where Paul says, not everyone who says he is a Jew is a Jew. And when you are looking today, for example, on that one nation, You've got Jews who are Orthodox Jews. You've got Jews who are atheist Jews. You have Jews who are Christian Jews. You've got all kind of extremes. You've got Jews who are Buddhists. So not everyone, because the meaning of the word Jew is that a worshipper of the true God, of God of creation. So that way, if you are thinking of a Jew, not everyone who is Jew is a Jew. Not everyone who is a Christian is a Christian. He can be calling himself a follower of Jesus or something else related with the name of Jesus. But he can be completely standing on the opposite side. That's the situation. Some will stand and will present as one thing, and they in reality will be something else. There was a time where blue eyes and blonde hair was mattering. Blue eyes and blonde hair, lives mattered. The time is now when black lives matter. Isn't it similar? True? But I can assure you, and Rahab is an example, that all lives matter. And nobody, I don't care what other people may think about it, but to God, and Rahab is an example, that all lives matter. Because he sent those two men to Jericho to save Rahab. And the people who may think differently, the time will come when they will be shouting, mountains and rocks fall upon us to hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. That is prediction. That is a promise. The kings of earth, the merchants, and will lament about all the lost properties, or about all the lost investments that was heaped up as treasures that was stolen or held from the people who were working. This is what is promised. Rahab knew exactly that God of Israel was not God of wood or plastic. Okay? She knew that God of Israel was the God of creation who created heaven and earth. And now the moment of decision had come. And she knew what she is deciding. She expressed it in Joshua chapter 2, verse 10 and 11. You can read these words. She knew who is she dealing with. Rahab risked her life to save those two men because she was investing her own life. She was already taking a stand for God. And she did not make mistake. When she came to the last time, or to the time, she was looking for those opportunities where she would be able to declare her own life on the side of God. And when was the time in our lives when we have decided to take a risk on the side of God? Because the time will come for us too. And if we don't learn to take the risk on the side of God, when the time for our decision will come, we will not make it. So we need to make constant decisions to stand on the side of God. When we recognize how great and powerful God is, it will help us to make that decision. And I believe that God is looking for people who will be able to make that risk, or to take that risk, to choose to stand on his side. Rahab acknowledged that Israel was creating this panic among the nations, not because they were so great people. You know, Israel was called by God not because they were the greatest nation on earth. There were greater nations around the world. But the foolishness of this world was a wisdom for God. And wisdom of this world is foolishness for God. So he chose the smallest, least expected to take his news to the world, to be the custodians of his law, custodians of his principle. Rahab acknowledged that behind the strength of Israel there was a great God, and that was the only reason why Israel was strong, why Israel was presenting threat to the rest of the world at that time. Is it that true today? I don't know. You can make your own conclusions. Are they standing where they should be standing? And the question is, am I standing where I should be standing? True? Because that makes the difference. That made the difference in the life of Rahab, and that will make the difference in the life of everyone. Rahab believed that these two men were in the special attention of God. And she connected herself. Now, therefore, she is deciding to plead with these two men for herself and for the whole family, for her family, for her mother and father and brothers and sisters. And you will read in the chapter that there is special contract that is taking place between Rahab and those two spies. What are they going to do? A red cord that will be hanging out the window when the armies of Israel will come. Isn't it amazing? This supposedly ungodly and ungodly woman, a prostitute that was able to believe in God of creation. Isn't it interesting? You know, the text in Hebrews chapter 11:31, we were reading this text. By faith, the harlot Rahab did not perish. She only have heard the information about Israel. She didn't experience anything of that. She only have heard the information, and based on what she have heard, she made her own decisions. And when the two men stood on the doorstep of her dwelling, for her, it was a deciding point. By faith, she did not perish with those who did not believe, when she have received the spies with peace. Is it only Rahab that have heard the information? Or did the Jerichonites hear the information about Israelites? Yet, it was the Rahab that made the right conclusions, the right decision to stay on the side of God. God chose Rahab because she had an active faith. Her lifestyle was not reflecting it, but she had an active faith. And it's fascinating that God chose people who have an active faith, whose faith was alive and ready to action. You know, in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6, we are reading another text. But without faith it is impossible to please him, for he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Do you think all of her life Rahab was seeking God, seeking after God? I think she spotted the moment when she was able to, when it was right to make the decision to demonstrate or to acknowledge and stand on the side of God. God is concerned with whether our faith is active or not. He also patiently works through our lifestyle. He's working with our imperfections. So he will see our heart, he will see the desire of our heart, and even against our lifestyle, he will lead us to enable us to be faithful to him. Rahab was a liar, she was idolater, and she was a sexually immoral person, but she was searching for something better. She believed God, and he forgave her. And when he looked at her, he forgave her past experiences, and gave her a new future. Did he? That was the case. That was the situation. When we are looking later on, she has a new path in her life. She is in the record or in genealogy of Jesus. Then you go to Matthew chapter 1, verse 5, and you read that Solomon gave birth to Boaz with Rahab. Who was Boaz? Boaz with Ruth was the father of David. And then Jesus comes from the line of David. So both Rahab and Ruth, both that were not Israelites, are coming into the lineage of Jesus. A new future that was opened for those who were truly searching for God. Ruth, remember, said, "Your God is my God." That was the case. She was searching there. God is concerned that we have the courage to take risk. Ruth was taking the risk with God. And we are reading that God is concerned that we acknowledge his power and that we stand on his side. In Romans chapter 8, verses 14 through to 17, we read these words. "For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are the sons of God." God is enabling those who want to follow him. Then we read, "For you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father." The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ. A new path, a future. The past is forgiven and left or dropped in the sea of forgiveness. The visitor asked a girl when he saw her playing with the dolls. He asked the girl, which one is his favorite doll? And for a moment, the girl disappeared in another room. And she brought a doll that had one eye falling off. The arm was torn away. The hair was falling away, and the shoe was one of the shoe was lost from that doll. And the visitor asked, "Why is this girl your favorite? Why do you love this doll?" And the girl's answer was stunning. She says, "Because if I will not love this doll, who else will?" And this is the character of God. God loves us even against our imperfections, in order that he will make us in his image. Even with the falling eyes and torn hair and lost shoes, he wants to make us into his image. God chooses ordinary people for extraordinary tasks. Rahab was a woman who was watching what's happening around her. She was making her conclusions, and when the time of decision came, she stood with courage. She took a risk with courage and stood on the side of God. The question for you and me is, will you take a stand when the time will come for you? I want to read a poem. God uses ordinary people to achieve extraordinary tasks. Have faith to believe he's with us no matter what he asks. Jesus had 12 disciples. They were all just ordinary men. But Jesus knew something more. He saw potential in all of them. God knows the potential we have, though we feel sometimes that He is putting us to the test. But He always knows our boundaries, that He takes over the rest. We are not really only ordinary people. We are worth so much more to the Father above. We are soldiers for His mighty army with weapon of faith and love. Have faith to believe that God is with you in doing whatever He asks, because God uses ordinary people like you and me to accomplish extraordinary tasks. May God bless you as you may feel ordinary and be ready to His extraordinary task when the time will come. May God bless you.